Hello, welcome to the Cinema Surfing Movie Podcast. I'm your one and only host on the show today, Chris Garner. I am here today to do a review on Warcraft, also known as Warcraft The Beginning. It is the new fantasy film out that's based on the very, very popular, or at least it was popular at a time, video game series World of Warcraft. And this is kind of a weird one for me to do today because this came out a couple of weeks ago for us in the UK. I think it's just come out in the US. I've been seeing a lot of reviews go up lately on the internet. And I was sort of holding off on this one because, I mean, I could have done a review back then when I first saw it. It probably would have been fresher in my mind than it is today at this point. I was waiting on the guys to see if any of them were planning on seeing it because the reviews are kind of a bit more difficult to do when you're just going on your own. It's sort of not as flowing. I'm going to try my best to hold the fort today as much as I can. I'm going to try and cover all the areas as well as I can, but I do prefer to have other people on the call with me. It's a bit more conversational, can go a little bit more into it, and you tend to stay on track a little bit more, although knowing us, we'd probably still go off track anyway. So I'm going to do my absolute best to try and make this a good review. So yeah, let's go straight into it then. So Warcraft, I'm going to read the plot off IMDb right now for anyone who's new to it, as I was before I saw this film. So the peaceful realm of Azeroth stands on the brink of war as its civilization faces a fearsome race of invaders, orc warriors fleeing their dying home to colonize another. As a portal opens to connect the two worlds, one army faces destruction and the other army faces extinction. From opposing sides, two heroes are set on a collision course that will decide the fate of their family, their people, and their home. So right from the bat with this one, let's go into sort of my history with the Warcraft series, World of Warcraft video games and things like that. So to this film, I was a complete newbie. Obviously, I was aware of the video game itself and the huge fan base that it has, ongoing fan base, I think. I think that's mostly in China. We'll come to that later. But I mean, I've never played the video games myself. I've never really saw them be played. I think the only sort of knowledge I had was of a couple of the looks of the characters, like I'd seen on various concept arts. Like I'd seen the orcs before on the front cover of the artwork of the games, and again, I don't know names. I'm complete noob to this, so someone can correct me in the comments. I think he's a villain. He's built in armor and he looks like a badass. He kind of looks like Vader in plate mail. That's the only way I can describe him. So I'd seen bits and pieces like that, but I really didn't know anything tangible or, you know, in depth with the story of it. So when I heard this film was being made, there was the whole buzz of, could this be the first properly decent video game movie adaptation they've ever done? And then the whole cast and crew came out, and with the crew you have the story by Chris Metzen, who works with Blizzard Entertainment, and then there was the talk that this is actually based on the lore of World of Warcraft. This is all this is like all the beginning of the history of where the games take place. This is actual story content that is within the games, I believe. I'm not sure if this was actually what the game was based on in the first incarnation of the game, or if this is all history that's discussed through the games, through books or text box screens, or whether it's through cutscenes and interactions and things like that. I don't know how the game works, but when I heard about this, I was excited because as a newcomer to this series, as a newcomer into this world, I wanted to start at the first point that the game did. And I'm always a big proponent with video game movies where they've always, the ones we've had so far, always kind of try to be as different from the game as possible. And I think sometimes it pays to be quite close to it, because I mean, that's what you expect. You don't want to alienate anyone who have played the games from the product. And this is kind of where my problem has come into this. I mean, I've done a bunch of reactions to this one with the trailers that have come out, and none of the marketing really won me over. A lot of the visuals were kind of pretty in it, but in terms of the characters and the acting didn't look that great from the trailers that I saw. But we got a few comments on that one saying, you know, they've played the video games, give it a chance, watch it, because this could be the next big thing in fantasy. I'm a huge fan of fantasy. Lord of the Rings are my favourite films of all time. The Hobbit films clearly weren't as good, but they're still enjoyable fantasy films. And then we've had some pretty hit and misses over the years with Narnia films and other little fantasy ones that have come out. And for the history that this has with the games and things like that, this could have set up to be the next one of those things. Now, I went to see the movie with my friend who also hadn't played the video game, so we went in complete newbies into this, and my initial impressions were I actually kind of hated this movie. Because for a number of reasons. The main reason for me is that this film went completely in the opposite direction, where I think that this was a movie made for the fans of the game only. Going into this, I was expecting a similar thing to Lord of the Rings, where there are going to be a lot of comparisons to Lord of the Rings with this one, because that's just the natural fantasy film series I can think of. But with Lord of the Rings, it begins with like a 7 to 8 minute long prologue, tells you about the races, tells you about the history of the ring and the alliances and the battles and who Sauron is, who Gollum was, and then straight after that you go into like another 10-minute sequence where it talks about hobbits and who they are and their lifestyle and their appearance. And it really, that movie, Fellowship of the Ring, is probably my favourite one of those films, because it completely guides you into that world. And by the time you come to the second and third film, you're completely up to speed with everything that's going on. This felt like the original cut was about 3 hours or even over that, and they've trimmed it down to 2 hours. This was a very, very abridged look into Warcraft, I think. And I mean, as soon as this film started off, the bog standard thing I knew from the trailers and the initial plot was that it was orcs against humans. I didn't really know any of the ins and outs in it. I didn't know any place names, race names, characters, or anything like that. And I was expecting to learn this and discover this as the film unfolded. And even now, with me doing this review, granted it's a week after, but even when I came out of the cinema, I would have been hard pushed to tell you any of the characters' names, any of the political relations in the area, any place names. So this is going to be a really awkward review for me, actually, because I really, even after watching this movie, I still feel like I know nothing about this world at all, and that kind of frustrates me as a fan of fantasy and sort of getting lost in the fantasy lore and fantasy history, world building and things like that. This frustrates me because I'm probably going to get some angry comments on this one again saying, oh, well, you didn't pay attention to the movie close enough. But I'm actually seeing a lot of reviewers speak about this, that they feel lost and they don't feel up to speed with it. And I don't blame that on the material, because I know that if I saw this material told in an effective way, or maybe if I did play the video games, I think that this is a world I could get lost in, because I'm a fan of other fantasy video games. The biggest series for me would probably be the Elder Scrolls series, most notably Oblivion and Skyrim. They are fantastic games, do an excellent job at creating this brand new world. And I would have loved the same with this one. So I feel really frustrated with it, because even after seeing it, I still don't know much about it, in all honesty. Duncan Jones directed this one. I haven't actually seen any of his previous work. I think his two other films before this one were Moon and Source Code, which I've heard great things about. So I don't know if this film has any kind of directorial stamp on it or any similar style to his previous other films. I'm going to have to check out at some point, because I do want to check out this guy's work before this movie. And I don't know if that's a fault of the direction or if it's a fault of the screenplay. I think the screenplay definitely plays a big part into it, because, as I said, this to me is a movie that is made purely for just fans of the video game and that already know this world. So, you know, they're going to sit into this film, they're going to sit down, watch the film, and they're going to get place names that they recognise and seeing it on the big screen. And I can understand that being a great experience, because for other video game trailers that have come out recently, sadly this will probably never get made now because of the huge box office flop that Ratchet and Clank was. But I don't know if anyone saw the Sly Cooper trailer that came out. I think it was a year ago or a couple of years ago now, and I think that was them banking on the success of Ratchet and Clank. They were going to do a Sly Cooper film afterwards, maybe a Jak and Daxter one, and then a team-up movie. And the Sly Cooper games are some of my favourite video games out there, and just seeing the characters on the big screen in that trailer with a film that was going to come out, maybe it still will, I'm not sure, was a completely insane experience. So I can understand fans of the game really digging this film, because they're seeing all of these things that they've played for years on the big screen and seeing all their characters come to life. But for casual viewers, and this is what I think the filmmakers need to understand with this one, the grand fan base and viewership of this film is going to be from casual viewers who just check out the trailer, think, oh, that looks a bit of all right, I'm going to pay my money, I'm going to go and see that movie. And I don't think it does an effective job with that. Now, I would be interested to hear of any of you guys listening to this who want to comment if you have played the video games and what your thoughts were on it. Can you see both sides of it, that you would understand the casual viewer being confused, or did you absolutely love it? Because I think that would be an interesting debate to have in the comments. So I'm going to get into it now, and again, it's going to be kind of rough me talking about this one, because I don't have anyone that I'm actually talking to get a discussion going with it, and my memory is incredibly hazy on this front. So I guess this again is going to be a spoiler-free section. I probably should have mentioned that at the start. We usually split our reviews into spoiler-free and spoilers. I'm honestly really not going to be talking much about spoilers, even in the spoiler section, because there's just really nothing for me to comment on this movie, in all honesty. So this will be spoiler free at the minute. If you still haven't seen Warcraft, you can carry on watching this, because I'm not going to give too much away. So our main character in the movie is probably Duratan, who is played by Toby Kebbell through the magic of motion capture. For anyone who doesn't know, Toby Kebbell played Doctor Doom in the recent Fantastic Four movie. That film was terrible, but I don't blame him. I think he's a great actor. He's most commonly known, though, for doing the motion capture to the character of Cobra in Rise and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Great actor, and he plays the lead protagonist for the Orc Horde, and the Horde's the name of the group of them. He's the Orc chieftain, and he is the one who's trying to instigate this alliance with the humans. The Orcs are rocking up, they're bad news, they want to conquer everything because their world is dying, and this is the guy who we are going to view this world through his eyes, and he's going to get us an alliance with the humans. And in all honesty, I really liked all the stuff with this character. I kind of wanted more. We, again, not giving anything away, but the opening couple of scenes, we see him in his village with his wife and unborn child, and it's some really nice stuff. It's like genuine interaction with them. They feel like real things despite them being CGI. And from the beginning, I was thinking, I might actually like this movie. This is going somewhere. And then I don't know if it gets, again, it feels like a much more complex story that's been condensed down, so it doesn't really linger on anything. Like, the pacing's quite bad in this movie, but it's very frenetic in how it keeps cutting to places. So in the first 10 minutes, I think we're shown about 3 or 4 locations, and we get a little subtitle come up at the bottom of the screen, and this was incredibly confusing for me. But the actual Orc characters, when they're on screen and they're having dialogue and we're getting some insight into this culture and their way of life, I really enjoyed that kind of stuff, and that's the kind of stuff I wanted more of in this film. Maybe we'll get a director's cut of this film that comes out and we'll get more of this stuff put back in, but I don't really think there'll be an outcry for it as much as there was for Batman v Superman with the ultimate cut that's coming out of that. And through that we get introduced to our villain. I'm by the way, guys, I'm on the Wikipedia page here. I'm having to look up all the names because, as I said, even though I've seen this film, I don't remember any characters' names. We have the character of Gul'dan, who is this Orc mage. He is the leader of the tribe, and he is the one who wants to invade Azeroth and conquer that kingdom because their world is dying. A very, very cool looking villain, I will admit. All the Orcs are kind of very bulky and have tusks and like big teeth and things like that, but this guy has like a full-on beard, and he's hunched over, and he's got a cane, and he looks very menacing. I really do like the conceptual look of a lot of the things in this film, and a lot of the characters and the armor and the weaponry, things like that. I absolutely love. Huge fantasy fan, so all that kind of stuff is fantastic to me. But the bad side of this, and I was getting this from the trailers as well, all the Orc stuff looked great. Where this film looked like it was going to be let down by, and it kind of was for me, was the human characters. We get our main character, Sir Anduin Lothar, played by Travis Fimmel. I have never seen this guy in anything before. I think his major thing of credit before is on the TV show Vikings. This guy was awful in almost every single way. Everything he said, all his lines of dialogue, I never bought for a minute. He has a son in the film, and just their father-son interaction was terrible. I never got any emotion from them. And his line reading was just really awkward. Like, there was just nothing about this character. I couldn't tell you anything about this guy. I mean, his armor looked cool. I mean, visually he looks like a cool character, but there's just nothing to him. There really, really isn't anything to him, and I think that maybe in the video game this character has a lot more to do. I think that a big problem with this film that I have is the casting of more or less all of the human characters. Whoever the casting director was on this did a really, really bad job. There are a lot of other great actors out there that I think could have brought some gravity to all of these roles. And I've even seen like bad scripts and like bad screenplays and things like that done well with good actors that can somehow make the material work. And this guy just looked like he was sleepwalking throughout the whole film. And the same goes through his like sidekick and like the other guy he meets, who's a mage. I'm just looking up his name now. The character of Khadgar, played by Ben Schnetzer, he was terrible as well. And the only way I can describe this film, in all honesty, for me, if we're going to compare it to other fantasy and kind of adventure things, it feels a lot like Dungeons and Dragons to me. And I know that's regarded as like one of the worst films ever made. And in all honesty, this was just terrible for me to watch, just the film in general. And a lot of the acting in it really reminded me a lot of that, or you know, like those old TV shows that came out. In fact, I think the TV shows deserve more credit than this. TV shows like Hercules, The Legendary Journeys, which have Kevin Sorbo in. Used to watch those in the 90s and I used to love them, but it felt very kind of... It's a big budget movie, clearly. I mean, this was done on a budget of $160 million, which is, you know, a fair amount for a standalone fantasy film. But it feels so low budget in some parts, especially with the acting. The biggest thing for me, biggest fault in this movie, I think, is the human acting, because we do spend a lot of the time with the humans. It's divided up between the orcs and the humans. They are the biggest opposing forces in this film. In fact, they're the only opposing forces in this film, and I think that they let themselves down with who they casted in these roles. So that was a big problem for me. Let's see. Let's talk about the effects in this one. We've talked about the orcs for a bit. Let's talk about the actual motion capture and the CGI behind it. So, I believe Weta Digital worked on the effects on this film. They've done the effects for Lord of the Rings, a lot of Peter Jackson's films, and I think they did the special effects for Caesar and the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes film, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Fantastic effects department, really, really great. There are some shaky effects in films like The Hobbit and things, but I pin that on a lack of time, lack of planning time and things like that. I think they always try and do the best they can with the time they have. And initial pictures came out for this. I remember the first picture of Durotan came out, and it looked absolutely jaw-dropping. From the one screenshot, it almost looked like a model. It almost looked like they'd constructed a life-size model of the character. How realistic it looked, I thought. Now we've come to the point where you can motion capture a character and it's uncanny whether it's an actor in makeup or CGI. And I've seen a couple of reviews with this saying that there is an overuse of CGI in this film, and I do agree with that. I think there is. That's mostly in locations for me. I think if they'd have used a few more real locations, it may have helped to have blended the CGI a lot more. But I actually defend the use of CGI for the orcs in this film. It's not like the orcs in Lord of the Rings, who have a very humanoid shape. You can dress them in makeup and things like that. That's one of the things I hated in the Hobbit films, how they suddenly made all the orcs digital. I think that took a lot of the grit away. And although it would have been nice to get more actors in makeup for other roles in this film, such as the dwarves, I really like the look of the dwarves, but it was very kind of weird to see CGI dwarves next to humans. I think that it would have been much better to get a smaller actor, get them in some makeup, or do like a kind of perspective cheat like the Lord of the Rings film used to do, where you film the smaller character very close to the camera and things like that. I think that could have worked really well for that. But the actual orcs in this film, I defend the use of CGI. These are hulking... Well, they are. They do look like the Hulk. It's like a kind of mix of like Shrek and the Hulk. These are huge, brutish creatures that you physically couldn't make work in makeup, I don't think. If you did, it had come across very much like the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde character from the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I don't think that would have worked, and especially with how many you're going to have on screen and characters interacting, I think that would have looked very hokey and low budget. So I do agree with the use of CGI, and I think that the best parts of the CGI in this film are where you've just got all the orcs together, in their own camp, in landscapes. The scenes where Duratan's speaking to his best friend on the cliffs, and it's a beautiful scene. The landscape shots in this film are jaw-dropping, and I think when you see, especially when you've got an orc close up to the camera, those are the moments where it looks real and it looks fantastic, and you can still see screenshots now. We'll go on Google Images, type in orc from the Warcraft movie, and they all look phenomenal. There's an effect shot in this. This is in the Human Kingdom, I think, where the main character is flying a griffin and it like breaks through the clouds, and you've got the turrets and the towers from the top of this castle emerging through the clouds, and it looks fantastic. I mean, get that as a screensaver or a wallpaper if you can. That looked amazing. Where the effects problems for me came in, and I had this problem with the trailers, and I thought they might be able to patch it up slightly for the film. I don't really think they did. It's when you've got the humans on screen with the orcs, or you've got the humans on a green screen, and I do think there are some points in the film where they got incredibly lazy with the green screen. And there's a scene, for example, where the humans are outside a castle. They're speaking to a congregation of people, and all the castle behind them, really, really close up to them, is all computer generated. And I think, you know, you could have built like half of the wall of a castle and just stuck it behind the actors for this one scene. Your far away shots is fine, your bird's eye view shots are fine to do in CGI, but when it's close up to an actor, it just looks really, really fakey fake. This is some of the problems I had with Peter Jackson's Hobbit films, with the over-reliance on CGI. You take away a lot of the realism of it. And there's another shot in this, which was in the trailer, where the orcs are going to deliver their terms to the humans, and they meet in this dark grey canyon, and there's a wide shot where you've got the orcs approaching on the left and the humans on the right, and it just looks fake. It looks like they've literally just photoshopped the humans straight onto there. There's no kind of depth to the background of the humans being there. It looks awkward, and those are the moments where it looked really cheap and really fake, and where I don't think the effects shots are going to hold up well as this film ages. And that's a shame when you do have a film which balances phenomenal effects work but then just doesn't do a good job of blending it. And I really just think it's genuinely down to a location. Like, I've seen effects films from like the 90s that still hold up well. The classic example of that will probably forever and always be Jurassic Park, which still looks fantastic to this day, and that's because they used real locations with real actors and things and added in the dinosaurs afterwards. And when you have fewer effect shots on screen, it just makes the CGI characters and creatures and things like that just feel all the more real, because everything else is real in the scene, in the particular shot. I think it's all a matter of balancing the percentage of effects ratio to real ratio, and I think that's just where this film fell short there. But on top, besides that, I think that the actual effects in the film were decent. It was just a case of blending. This especially came into it towards the end of the film with the big battle scenes where you've got hundreds and thousands of orcs on screen with humans trying to sword fight, and just nothing felt real to me. I knew these actors were just on a green screen, just wall-to-wall green screen, just probably swinging a green screen sword around, just trying to react to whatever they could, and that didn't feel real to me. Let's get into the music, because I always like talking about music in films. I think it's an area that's often overlooked. So the guy who did the score to this was Ramin Djawadi. He does the soundtrack for the Game of Thrones TV show. He's done the score to Pacific Rim and the original Iron Man film. He's a fantastic composer, and I mean, he's pretty used to fantasy at this point after scoring 6 seasons of Game of Thrones, still going strong. And the music in this film was pretty decent. I think the only thing I will say is that the music worked for the film, but there wasn't really any memorable music cue that I remember from it. I remember there was some kind of driving, adventurous theme throughout the credits, kind of like a marching theme, but that's really all I can remember from the film. Maybe it sounds better when you just listen to the score on its own, and it's definitely a darn sight better than the music they used in the trailers, which was like weird dubstep music. Not quite sure why they used that for World of Warcraft, but I mean, he delivers a solid score, but it's just nothing memorable. It kind of blends in with the background. So let's get into positive and negative, and then I'll sort of give my thoughts on a sequel and go into a few spoilers afterwards. So my positive and negative for this film. I think my positive is just sort of the material they have to work with. There's a lot of interesting things they could have done with this movie. You've got orcs, you've got dwarves, you've got humans, you've got fantasy locations, griffins, epic battles, multiple races, character conflicts, political dilemma. I think there's just loads of interesting stuff that they had on offer with this film, and I think that Blizzard just went a bit too crazy with the fan service. And I think this film effectively demonstrates, and this is kind of the negative as well, that it has all this interesting material, but on the negative side of it, for me, it feels very, very alien to me still. I was hoping that this film was going to paint a better picture for me, and then when you get into the sequel, if they ever did one, we'd know as an audience. We'd be into this world, we'd know everything that's going on. And I think that Blizzard just went a little bit crazy with the fan service, in all honesty, and I think this film is an interesting example with video game films, or even just films that are an adaptation of something, that you do have to have that fan service in there, whether it be a look of a character or a name drop here and there, but you also have to remember the casual viewership, and I think that's what this film didn't do. Another negative for me is the human acting in it. In fact, most of the acting, in all honesty, that wasn't motion capture, I thought was just piss poor, really, really terrible. Like, even just, I've seen low budget fantasy like drama pieces on the TV, or as I said, like Dungeons and Dragons. It felt very much that caliber of acting, and I think that lets it down. It cheapens it slightly. It almost felt like Eragon in some bits, or like the last Narnia film. Like, I just didn't care for anything that was going on, and that's the biggest problem for me with this film. I got to about the halfway point, and a character mentioned something, and I turned to my friend and I said, wait, what's that? What are they trying to do now? What are they trying to accomplish? And I just said, you know what, forget it, I don't care. And that's the frustrating thing. I really wanted to care for this movie. People in the comments were like, give it a go, give it a watch, you never know, you might be invested into this. And I can't express enough to you guys how much I wanted to be just enveloped into this world and become a fan of World of Warcraft. And sadly, I don't think the movie did a great job of it. Now, my thoughts on a possible sequel, it's entirely possible, I think, at this point, and I think that China's kind of going to give it a walkaway. I mean, it originally came out over here in the UK, really didn't make all that much. It was kind of a flop, and then I think it came out in the US, and again, not many people were gravitating towards it. It wasn't turning in much of a profit at all, and then China came along and boom, breaks records. Biggest non-weekend opening day on record, and currently 4 days into its cinematic release over there, it's already made $145 million. So I think this film is definitely on track to making its budget back in terms of what the production costs were. It's on 160 mil at the minute, so I think it definitely stands the chance of getting to about 250 or even 300 with China, and by the time this is out of cinemas. But you know what, that's still going to be a flop for the studio because of the sheer amount of marketing they have put into this movie. Now, the marketing for this film has been absolutely insane. The amount of TV spots and trailers I've seen on this thing has been absolutely astronomical, and I'm sure they've endorsed it and done adverts to it as well on the actual video game in terms of the website or the forums and things like that. I don't think they will have made the budget back on that, because they always say the rule of thumb is take whatever the budget was for the film and then double it for the marketing. And I don't think it'll make that much back. And I think the studios are wise enough to know that maybe a sequel shouldn't be in the works just yet because of the negative criticism it's had from most people, or the very, very subpar average critical reception that this movie's had so far. It does sequel bait. The end of the film does link into what they could do as a sequel, but to be honest, it's not really a film I'd be interested in. I mean, this was kind of a film that was going to get me into this world and get me involved in it. And as of right now, I mean, you could probably tell from the review, I'm kind of all over the place with this. I'm very scattered. I don't know characters' names. I don't know locations. And as a 2-hour film that's meant to get you into this world, I think that's a problem with the film. So that's kind of it for my spoiler free, and to be honest, most of my review on this film, I'm going to go into a few little things that I did enjoy in the film right now. This is kind of in spoiler territory now. Again, I'm sort of going to the orc stuff. There's an orc fight in it, which is called the Makgura. I think I'm pronouncing that right, where it's an act of dominance where you'll get two orcs that pick a fight with each other, and it's a fight to the death to decide who becomes the new leader. It's the tribe. They're a very alpha male driven race, the orcs are, and it's a fight between Duratan and Gul'dan, and it's a great fight. It's very, very intense. And again, another comparison I'm going to have to this film, and again, both of these films have a fight, is the Golden Compass film that came out many, many years ago. It was an absolute piece of shit. I hated that movie, but the one part of that film I enjoyed was when we got to see the two polar bears fighting to the death, and it was awesome to watch. And it was kind of this film as well. Like, I completely wasn't invested in the plot or what was going on, but seeing the two orcs just kind of slugging it out with each other was kind of great to watch. And this was the stuff I enjoyed to see. This was the culture, and I would have liked to have seen more of this. I don't know how they would have effectively done that, though, on the flip side, because I think the film may have got bogged down with a lot of exposition. But then again, going back to it, Lord of the Rings did it. And Lord of the Rings is like a 3-hour movie, and it had a lot more stuff going on it in terms of the world and the quest and the plot and the characters, the sheer volume of characters, everything like that. And that did a great job. To me, Lord of the Rings films are flawless. I've said this before. I think they're perfect films, in my opinion. And I think that's kind of the problem with fantasy films now. Lord of the Rings has both made fantasy and ruined fantasy. It's made fantasy because it brought fantasy completely back to the big screen in a prominent way. Return of the King just swept the board with the Oscars, picked up 11 at the end of that film, which was kind of a nod and a thank you to Peter Jackson for the amount of years he filmed these films back to back. But it's also ruined fantasy because now we'll never have another fantasy film, in my opinion, that's as good as or can come anywhere close to what Lord of the Rings achieved. But with this orc fight, this was the kind of glimpse into that world building I wanted to see. It was an interesting cultural practice of this race of characters, and it was cool to see. I wanted to see more. The film ultimately boils down to, if I remember rightly, Sir Anduin Lothar picking a fight with another orc. I don't think it's Gul'dan he picks a fight with. I'm trying to remember now. I think it's another orc, and there's this huge build up to it where he's going to have to prove himself, and it's just over so quickly, and it just took all the hype away from that moment. Like, it's this one human who's going to challenge an orc, fight to the death. It kind of mirrors the opening scene of the film, which was actually kind of a really neat opening scene. It was like an over-the-shoulder camera shot of the orc as he's about to charge at the human in a battle to the death. And it was just over so quickly, and then we get the whole fallout with a battle scene at the end. And I guess I should actually talk about Paula Patton's character here, who plays a half-orc, half-human hybrid called Garona. She is actually in makeup, and I thought that makeup was really, really good. I thought she was a strong character. I wanted to see more of her character. She was probably my favourite character, like actual on-screen actor in the entire film. I think she was a very interesting character. I think her initial stake and where she begins in the film, where she's kind of a slave, and she's even a slave to the orc race because she's a hybrid, and they look down on them and they lump her into a cage with the rest of the slaves they have. But I think her character grows, and she kind of does a Jon Snow thing towards the end with Corran Halfhand, where she kills the king of the humans in order to be befriended once again by the orcs, so that hopefully with her being part of that tribe, she can usher in a peace between the orcs and the humans. And again, this is more of the stuff where it comes into where it begins to sequel bait at the end. And yeah, man, we're not going to get a sequel to this, I don't think. But her character, I thought, was really interesting. It's just a shame because they kind of do another love thing in it, and it seems like we can't have any kind of film or any fantasy film without lumping a shoehorned love plot into there. So there's this awkward romance thing with Lothar and Garona, and I really did think that needed to be in the film. And even if it did, you need a better actor than Travis Fimmel in there, because this guy just cannot make any material work, at least in this film anyway. And that's really all I can say for the spoilers, in all honesty. Like, I know that I've gone on for quite a long time with this review, definitely longer than I expected, and I'm sorry this has been really rambly and disjointed. As I said, I'm on my own, and I have a tendency to ramble when I'm on my own, and when I haven't got people to do a conversation with, then we can't sort of make the review concise. So I guess I'm just going to kind of wrap it up here. Final thoughts on this movie. If you're a fan of the video game series, you've probably already checked it out. Go and check it out if you're a fan of the video games, because I actually think you'll probably really, really enjoy seeing all these characters on screen and seeing your favourite video game franchise come to life on the big screen. But I think casual viewers are really going to have a hard time with this film. I love fantasy. I'm usually really good at getting myself up to speed with fantasy worlds and the lore and things like that, but this one I was almost completely lost with. It's a very simple plot, don't get me wrong, but in terms of the actual geographical orientation of things and the race's history and character interactions and how characters are related to each other, I think that's where the film has a problem, and it's a good testament to how you need fan service in a film, but you also need to consider your casual viewership, and I don't think this film did. I was very bored during it. It's probably one of my least favourite films this year, if I'm going to break it down. I wasn't angry at the film, because I really didn't have many massively high expectations from it based on the trailers. I was just a little disappointed that it's another kind of video game movie that's another failure. And it's a world I did want to sort of get into. If not through the video games, I really wanted to get into it through this, and I thought it did have a chance at doing that, and sadly I don't think it did. I think that Assassin's Creed at the end of this year is going to be the ultimate tell as to whether video games ever have a hope of having a good movie adaptation. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the trailers with Assassin's Creed. I think it's doing some interesting stuff. Good use of practical work from the trailer in that. So I think that's going to be the tell. If that's bad, I know that they've commissioned a Tomb Raider video game film with Alicia Vikander. That might be good, and if that isn't, I think that one will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I actually think that this film, Warcraft, sort of my very, very, very final point on this, may have been better if it had just all played out kind of like Avatar, with just purely animation all the way through it. I know Avatar had the humans in it as well, but I think with this one, in terms of it being based on the video game, I think if you'd have just made this look like a pre-rendered cutscene all the way through, I think it may have worked. Like, definitely with the CGI implementation and things like that, I definitely think it would have looked a lot better. Maybe like the Final Fantasy films that came out. I think one was Spirit Within and Advent Children, I want to say. I think that was the name of those. I mean, visually, they kind of worked for the film. At least Advent Children did, so I think they could have got away doing this one all animated, and then maybe people would have gravitated towards it a little bit more, may have looked a little bit more authentic. I'm not really sure. Anyway, yeah, that's my final thoughts on Warcraft. Again, apologies for not having the other guys on this review, and that I've been very rambly on this review. Congratulations if you made it all the way through to the end. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, we are going to have our Game of Thrones discussion show on Tuesday of this week. We've been doing that weekly. You can check out the playlist for that in our videos. Also, on June 26th, we'll be doing our third episode of Timestamp Zero. That's a show where each month we pick a list of 5 films, then we pass that list on to you guys to get voting on which film you want us to watch. We all sit down, do a commentary on it, watch the film together. It's good fun. So far, we've done The Prestige and Rush, and this month is my picks. You've got 5 great films on there. You've got American Psycho, we've got Braveheart, John Carpenter's The Thing, Rocky, or The Terminator. So please do get your votes in. The link to the straw poll link to get voting on that will be in the description below. Yeah, so that'll do it. So please comment, subscribe, let me know what you thought of Warcraft. Did you like it? Didn't you like it? Have you played the video games? Anything you like, please do drop me a comment. I'd like to get some opinions on this from people that have played the video game series to gauge their opinion on it and see if they think it works. So yeah, that'll do it for me on this video, and until the next one, I will see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.